Hello again and welcome back. Things didn't exactly go as planned on Sunday. I forgot to turn on the sound for the recording. So I thought I would redo the sermon for you today on Tuesday to kind of catch you up to speed on our sermon series called The Journey. Sometimes our plans don't work out the way we think they should. Sometimes we get rerouted in other directions, and I guess that's what's happened here on Sunday morning. I got rerouted in a new direction. I've always felt like God is pushing me to expand my skills into recording and editing, and maybe that's why I'm doing this today. Maybe we'll expand our sermon series and Bible studies via online experiences. Who knows? But welcome back. We're talking about the journey, and today we're talking about the Apostle Paul and his experience on the Damascus Road of being rerouted in a new direction. Have you ever been rerouted on a plane trip? Have your plans ever suddenly changed dramatically? I remember one year I just got back from Iraq and I was reassigned to a new naval group. And this was going to be the first time that I was going to have the opportunity to serve on board a ship, and I was very excited. I planned my trip for months. And at the time, back then, we had something called Defense Travel System. It allowed us to log onto the Pentagon computer. We could order up our own rental car, make our own tickets, pending approval by the Navy, but it all sounded great. It was like an Expedia for the Navy, where we could plan everything. And I started planning my trip to Thailand. That's where they were sending me for a naval exercise. I planned that trip for 6 months. When I was going to leave, when I was coming back, it was great. I was excited because I was going to be on a ship for the first time. I know it's odd, but I spent a lot of my time with Marines and Seabees in the deserts, not on a ship, even though I was a Navy chaplain. Well, about a month before my trip, out of the blue, and I mean literally out of the blue, we found out that there was a possibility we could adopt a young baby. But we only had a month before she was born. And boy, I counted down the days, and it's like, okay, I went from not knowing I was ever going to have a child to, I'm going to have a child, and I was going to go to Thailand. I still have to go to Thailand. Well, we cut it close. The day came for her birth, and we rushed down to Dallas to be there for her birth. I was one of the first people to get to hold my daughter. And then the next day, I had to leave for Thailand. I had to leave my wife and newborn child there in the hospital in Fort Worth, and I hopped a plane to go back to XNA in Fayetteville in order to catch my flight that would take me to Chicago and then to LAX and then on to Thailand. It was a fast journey. And when I got to XNA, they told me, by the way, your flights out of Chicago have been canceled due to weather. You'll need to contact Defense Travel. And I called up Defense Travel and I said, okay, my plans have been disrupted. They think they can get it all rearranged tomorrow, so I'm just going to go back home, get some sleep, and start again tomorrow. And of course, military bureaucracy, the way it is, said, no, you get on the plane and you go to Chicago, and then we'll figure out where you're going from there. So I got on the plane to Chicago, got to Chicago, spent the night in the airport. By the next day, the Navy had straightened it out, and they put me on a plane, not to LAX and to Thailand, but to London, where they were hoping I would be able to catch another flight to another town, and in that town, I'd be able to catch another flight to another town, and from there, maybe get to Bangkok. And I get to Thailand, I get to London, and it's another all-day experience. Get on a plane. I finally make it to Bangkok. It's been 48 hours since I've slept. When I arrived to Bangkok, I realized I had missed all the group buses. My sailors had already left. They had got on their boats. They were gone. I was in Bangkok alone. I called the base. I said, what do I do? They said, well, get a taxi. I said, it's a 3-hour taxi ride. Don't worry about it. The military will pay for it. So I get in a taxi. And the taxi driver, apparently, I don't know what happened. Maybe it was because I was sleep deprived for 48 hours. Maybe it was because I didn't understand the language or the customs, but The taxi driver drove me to a deserted parking lot. Well, it wasn't exactly deserted. It was full of other drivers. And he dropped me off. And I got a little worried. What's he doing? What's he pulling here? And being sleep deprived, I did the only thing an American could do. I got into a defensive stance. I said, okay, guys, bring it. Well, one of them, realizing, I guess, that I didn't understand what was going on, that I was out of my mind, bundled me off into his car and he drove me to the base. But like I said, it was too late. I had missed my ship, my chance to sail. And so the Navy assigned me to a Royal Thai captain, and we were going to do humanitarian projects. My trip, my plans had been totally disrupted, derailed, rerouted in a new direction, and it wasn't the direction I was planning. First of all, despite my excitement of being able to go, when my daughter came, I didn't want to go anymore, but I had to. I had wanted to stay there with her, but nope, I was rerouted in a new direction. And when I got to Thailand, and what I wanted to do was to be on a ship, I got rerouted into something else. Today, that's exactly what happens to Paul, or Saul, as we know him. Now, contrary to pop Christian psychology, Paul and Saul, they're both the same person. God did not change his name to Paul after his quote-unquote conversion. Paul is simply the Romanized version of his Hebrew name, Saul. Well, Saul is an enemy of the early church. The Acts says in Acts chapter 9 that Paul, furious at these Christians, was breathing fire and murderous thoughts. And he went to the chief priest and he said, give me permission to go to the surrounding towns and into that big city of Damascus so that I can hunt these heretics down. They're heretics. They're poisoning our religion. They're not pure. They're not clean. And we need to clean this up. And the chief priest gives Paul permission. Go arrest them. Go round them up. Let's put a stop to this movement. And Paul takes off with his cronies to Damascus. Now, along that road, contrary to what you might have heard, Paul was never knocked off his high horse. There's not a horse in the story. Paul's walking like just about everybody else did in the ancient world. And suddenly, he sees a blinding light that tosses him back onto the ground. And then, in a very loud voice, he hears his name spoken. Saul, Saul, why do you persecute me? Now, did you catch that? The twice use of his name? Saul, Saul. Throughout the Bible, when God calls people, he uses their name twice as emphasis. It's kind of like the way your mothers and fathers did when they called you by your full name. God wanted Saul's attention, his full attention, just like God did with Moses. Moses, Moses, or with Mary, Mary, Mary. And Saul, Paul, says, Lord, is that you? Well, the story shifts, and Paul finds himself stranded and blinded on the side of the road. All of his plans, his travel itineraries have been disrupted, and now he doesn't know what's going to happen. The story switches to a man named Ananias who his day is not going to go according to the way he planned it because God's going to disrupt him and lead him and reroute him in a new direction. And God says, Ananias, I got a job for you. I want you to go and meet this guy named Saul. And Ananias goes, wait right there, Lord. Saul is bat done crazy. He's breathing murderous threats against your people. He's persecuting us. He's torturing us. He's arresting us. He's not a nice guy. And what do you want me to do? You want me to go pray with him? God, I think you're crazy. And God says, Ananias, don't worry about it. I've got this all planned out. Just do what I say. It's all going to work out. And so Ananias takes a big, deep breath, a sigh, and he goes. And he meets Saul. the guy that was trying to kill him. And he says, "Brother Saul, God sent me here to pray with you." And as Ananias starts praying with Saul, the scales fall from Saul's eyes and he can see again. And Ananias takes Saul under his wings and begins to teach him about the gospel, about Jesus Christ. And a few weeks later, to everyone's surprise, Saul jumps up. This murderous persecutor of the church stands up one day and starts proclaiming the gospel of Christ, the love of Christ. And everybody's amazed at his wisdom, his knowledge, and they're really amazed at his dramatic conversion, of how he went from this person to that. And I imagine Paul too is wondering, how did my trip to Damascus to do this, to persecute the church, how did that get rerouted into becoming a preacher and a servant of the church? He was rerouted by God's love. His plans, both his and Ananias that day, were totally disrupted, totally rerouted, sent off in another direction. Have you ever felt like that? Think about the last couple of years. Back March 13 of 2020, when the announcement came, the country is shutting down, we're going into quarantine, everybody stay home. I remember I had all these plans for the summer. I wanted to go hiking in Croatia. I remember we had plans to do this, that, and the other. I had my sermon series all lined out for the summer, and suddenly all that gets thrown out the window. Easter, Lent, out the window. We had to do something completely different. How I was accustomed to doing church suddenly changed, and I had to learn new things. God rerouted me in a completely different direction. And as we think about the 2 years, how our lives have been disrupted, think about the divisive politics of our country. We were going into a presidential election, and think about how bitter and angry that got, and how close our country came to unraveling at the seams. And then now, even as the pandemic continues, we hope it's about to end, but it's still there. We now are hovering under the threat of nuclear war once again. Something I thought I left behind in the 80s suddenly has reappeared. Are we on the verge of World War III? I have no idea. I just know that every time I think I have my plans lined out, something comes along and disrupts them, reroutes them. Maybe in the past few years you've lost a career. Maybe you've lost friends, families. Maybe you've lost loved ones. The life that you thought you were going to have is suddenly no more, and you're going off in a new direction. Maybe you've received a cancer diagnosis or some other debilitating illness that you weren't expecting, you weren't planning on, and now your life has taken a whole new direction. You've been rerouted. And sometimes in the midst of that chaos and uncertainty, our hearts break, we get fearful, and we wonder. But I invite you today to think about this. Think about how God can also be in the midst of these disruptions. How God can be in the midst of this chaos, reaching in to that hellish environment where everything's fallen apart, reaching in and trying to pull something good out of it. And even though we're being rerouted in a new direction, God is there. And maybe God is rerouting us in a new direction because we're needed elsewhere. When I made my plans for Thailand, I had no idea that I would soon be a new father right the day before. And then when I became a new father, I had no idea that my travel plans to Thailand the next day would be so disrupted and I would miss out on everything. But when I got there, and I started working those humanitarian projects, I discovered something. I discovered that in the midst of that chaos, God was reaching in to do something good. Yeah, with this Royal Thai captain, we bounced around the country. We visited orphanages, hospitals, and schools. We made plans with the locals that we'd bring in Marines and sailors and Seabees to help them paint, help them do plumbing, help them build buildings, help them construct playgrounds. And sometimes we even just came in and played with the kids, played football, soccer, basketball, anything. And one day, towards the end of that work, I took a group of Navy officers and we went to an AIDS orphanage for little children. Kids who had been abandoned by their mothers because their mothers who had been prostitutes had died and these kids had no one. And they ended up in this AIDS orphanage sponsored by a church. And when we got there, I said, well, what are we going to do? Do we need to paint? Do we need to do this? They said, no, we just need somebody to come in and play with the kids, read to them, take them out, buy them ice cream, just spend time with them because they have no one. They have no adults in their life, really. No one that takes an interest in them, no one that cares for them or loves them. And so here we were, a bunch of Navy officers hardened by war, and we spent the whole day playing and laughing and reading, spoiling the kids to no end with endless ice cream. I spent a lot of money that day. But of all my Navy years, that was the most rewarding experience of my time in the Navy. Of just being there and bringing a little joy to someone that I knew that probably would never make it to junior high or high school. They'd be dead before that. And I think back on that and I think, if my plans had gone the way I had wanted them to, I would have missed out on that experience. Those kids would have missed out. Sometimes, and I'm not saying all the time, but sometimes we're rerouted in new directions, like Paul, like Ananias, because God needs us here, not there. Yeah, we want to be here, but God wants us over there. And that's where we need to go. Sometimes those disruptions, when everything is going to hell in a handbasket and chaos is raining down, sometimes we just need to stop and say, okay, God, all of my plans have gone out the window. Where do you want me? One of the most important lessons I learned from the military is you plan for war. And the moment the war starts, when the first bullets start flying, you throw all your plans out the window. Because a good leader always adapts to new situations. You know, we like for life to be planned out. We like to know where we're going. And that's not always going to be guaranteed. Sometimes life's going to interfere and reroute us in a different direction. And sometimes it's a direction we're not going to want to go. It's scary, it's frightful. It might be even an ending. But in the midst of that, as we're being rerouted, I urge you to open the eyes of your heart. Try to find God reaching into your situation to bring something good out of the chaos and hell you're experiencing. We're all going to be rerouted in new directions. We need to cling to God's promise that God will always be there for us. We need to open our eyes and see, as we get rerouted, God, where is it that you're sending me? Who is it that you're calling me to serve? How am I to bear witness for you? Because sometimes it's the disruptions in life, when our plans get tossed, is when God works the best. In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, I pray. Amen. Thank you.